Michael Moszyński. Thanks to him, the British Prime Minister apologized to the Polish nation for omitting Poles in the victory parade.
Never give up, never give up, never give up.
His motto in life is never give up. But what is the son of the soldiers who fought under the command of the indomitable General Maciek fighting for today? Could the British one day rehabilitate General Sosabowski? What did he once hear from the legendary Margaret Thatcher? And what does he say about his Polish DNA? All that coming up next. Stay with us.
Po II wojnie światowej wiadomo, że komuniści zabrali generałowi Andersowi, Maczkowi i Sosabowskiemu w większości polskie obywatelstwo. Wielu naszych żołnierzy po II wojnie światowej nie mogło wrócić do kraju rządzonego przez komunistów. Wiadomo, co im groziło. Jak było z twoim tatą? Czy twój tata kiedykolwiek po II wojnie światowej przyjechał do Polski?
No, so after the war, my father felt he could not go back to Poland because the Russians had killed a lot of his family. My cousin, who is interesting, so my other uncle, my father's elder brother, Jerzy, was in charge of all of the electricity of Poland before the war. And he was sent to Siberia with his family after the Russian invasion. And again, many people in Britain don't realise this. The Russians were in alliance with the Nazis to occupy Poland. They took half of the country, and they treated the Poles as badly as the Germans did. One of my cousins was on the first day of the war destroyed was killed in a bombing of Lvov by the Germans. 2 weeks later, the Russians arrived. They took another cousin into the police cells of the NKVD in Lvov and put a bullet in the back of his head. And then one of the other cousins, who was Major Adam Moszyński, he went to fight on with Anders and Monte Cassino. He was one of the Polish officers that was taken to Katyn, and he was one of the 200 who were not killed. And we think it was because he had a German wife. He wrote the Katyn list of all the soldiers who died, and until Yeltsin passed on the signed order by Stalin, the British government failed to accept that it was a Russian atrocity, because the Russians blamed the killing of 20,000 Polish officers as well as priests and intelligentsia in those woods.
25,000 Polish soldiers.
In 3 different locations. That was horrific, one of the worst war crimes imaginable. And yet the British wouldn't accept it. And in fact, again, under the Labour government, when there was a Katyn memorial finally created, the Labour Prime Minister, Jim Callaghan, said that any British soldier who had Polish military relatives who attended the festival would be decommissioned. And I was in the British Army at that time. I regret I didn't go, but anyway, the Katyn thing was horrific. So that's why I think my father couldn't go back to Poland after the war. The British government actually spent a lot of time trying to persuade people to go, and the Foreign Secretary wrote letters on official paper to all the Polish army soldiers. There was 250,000. It's a huge number. But eventually, Britain did allow sanctuary for those Poles and allowed them to assimilate into the UK. Some went to settlement camps in Wales and Scotland. I think my father ended up in London, and I've got a collection of letters where he was writing because as part of the post-war agreement, anyone who'd been displaced and they lost their job because of the war was automatically entitled to get their job back. And he wrote to the Polish bank in Paris, but it was then under Soviet control, and they refused to allow him to work there. But I think it was very upsetting for him because he had a good position there, and in the end he had to settle in London. And because he spoke fluent languages, he worked for French Railways in quite a junior administrative role. but at least it gave the family opportunity. We got a free ticket every year to go and visit Europe, so that was a blessing from that. So he settled in England, married my mother, and had 3 children, all of whom I think have done very well.
Wiele pamiątek po twoim tacie możemy znaleźć m.in. w Instytucie Sikorskiego, to właśnie ostatnio oglądałem.
So when I was 15 and I was looking into my father's history, I discovered about the Sikorski Institute, which is an amazing museum right in the heart of London. And 2 Polish officers at the end of the war were trying to find somewhere to house the memories of the Polish army in exile. And I think they knocked on the door of this house in near the Albert Hall, and the owner said, "Oh, that's an amazing, moving story," and donated the house to become the Sikorski Institute. So it was a great honour for me to pass on my father's uniforms and his medals, and also the extraordinary album of about 70 photographs taken in 1930 at the Cavalry School, because I think it really captures a moment in history. This is a Polish army before it, mechanized, where, I think people have the wrong idea about the Polish cavalry. The Polish cavalry was actually not charging panzers or designed as an attacking force on horseback. It was a mobility to move soldiers quickly across rough terrain. So I think the photographs show him lancing with sabre on very interesting exercises.
Exercises, exactly.
And you had to be a great horseman, and there's some amazing shots of him, I think, showing his horsemanship.
Okej, mówiliśmy o twoim tacie, ale teraz będziemy mówić o tobie i twojej pracy. Mówię Michael, myślę Michał, bo po polsku Michael to Michał. No i chcemy poznać właśnie twoją historię, między innymi osobą, która w Polsce jest przez bardzo, bardzo wielu ludzi szanowana. Mówi się, że ta osoba wraz z Ronaldem Reaganem i papieżem Janem Pawłem II, świętym, doprowadziła do upadku do komunizmu, do tego, że Polska jest wolna, do tego, że upadł mur berliński. A ja wiem, ty bardzo długo i bardzo dobrze współpracowałeś z żelazną lady, panią Margaret Thatcher.
So I grew up in the 1970s, and as I say, the heart of the Cold War, and I remember seeing I felt very angry with what happened at the end of the war. I couldn't understand why France and Britain had joined forces to defend Poland, yet Poland lost at the end of the war. We beat Germany, but we lost Poland. So I was angry about that. And when Margaret Thatcher came to the UK political scene, I saw her as somebody who had the right view of history and the right determination to working with Ronald Reagan, end the Cold War, which was fantastic. So when I was 18, it was actually my ambition to join the regular army, British Army. I wanted to be in a cavalry regiment like my father, to help defend against the Russians. But I had an accident when I was young, and I can't hear in one ear. So I was unable to pass the medical. But again, that Polish determination, I found a different solution, which is in the British Army we also have what's called the territorials, which is part-time, where you train and you attend weekend and 2-week camps in Germany. And I joined the Westminster Dragoons, and I managed to get past the medical by other means. And it was funny because when I was being trained as a tank driver, you have to do a license test, like driving a car. And the helmet you wear as a tank driver has one ear for the tank commander and one for the radio net, and you can switch around, but the switch wasn't working. So all I heard was the tank commander in my deaf ear. So I was there at the controls. The tank commander who's taking the test was in the turret. Start the engine. Move ahead. Then there's the camp gates. Turn left. All the way through. And then at the
Fantastic.
end was a Y junction. Had to be a Y junction. Turn right. I turned right and I was correct and I passed my test. So I was in Germany. We were doing exercises to prepare for if the Russians invaded, taking on the SAS. It was a very interesting time, and I was proud that I was able to serve in a limited way as part of the defence of Britain, and ultimately helping Poland become independent again. Because if NATO hadn't existed, Russia would still be in Poland.
Three persons: Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Iron Lady, and our Pope John Paul II.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Margaret Thatcher, jaką była kobietą prywatnie? Ty miałeś z nią często kontakt.
Yes, I was very proud to host her last public engagement. This was about 15 years ago. We had this lovely event, and she was still very sharp, although she was obviously quite old at that stage. And because I'd worked for the Conservative leader Michael Howard, and I was doing the advertising for his general election campaign in 2005, and I mentioned that to her, and she said, "Well, thank you. You've done a tremendous job for the party in the country, because it turned the Tony Blair massive victory into a much smaller one. So the election afterwards, David Cameron was able to win and change British history. So I again had a small part, and it was a great honour to meet a great lady."
Michael, jak ty do tego doprowadziłaś, że brytyjski premier Tony Blair przeprosił Polaków za to, że w czasie parady zwycięstwa w Londynie po II wojnie światowej nie było Polaków?
I think I'm quite good at writing letters, and it's about pitching it correctly. It's also about understanding the political situation in the EU at that time, where Tony Blair was trying to find allies who would support the Britain's interests against France and Germany, who, to be honest, had really run the EU for their own benefit for many years. And the timing was to send the letter the 2 days before his visit to Warsaw. So it gave him something positive to be able to bring as a gesture of. It was before they opened the borders to Poles to come here. I think he predicted there would be like 40,000. In fact, it was 1 million arrived. And I think that the Poles who came to England after the borders were opened have a very good reputation here, because they're hard workers. They don't just come here to have benefits. They contribute to society, and many of them now gone back to set up their own businesses. So I think Anglo-Polish relations have improved.
Kolejna bardzo ważna sprawa, która jest troszeczkę zadrą w polsko-brytyjskich kontaktach, stosunkach. Chodzi o sprawę Market Garden, operacji Market Garden i generała Sosabowskiego, i o tym, co zrobiono z generałem Sosabowskim, jak go traktowano po wojnie. Czy ty wierzysz, że kiedykolwiek ta sprawa zostanie ostatecznie wyjaśniona i nasz generał zostanie zrehabilitowany?
I personally think it was disgraceful how particularly General Browning behaved towards General Sosabowski at the end of Market Garden. I first was aware of the whole battle from the amazing film from 1977, A Bridge Too Far. In my later career, I actually have been fortunate to work with Gene Hackman's agent, who said that Gene, before he died, was very, very angry on behalf of General Sosabowski, because he has studied his history to take that part, and I think the part he played in that film was very realistic.
Film naprawdę bardzo fajny, bardzo ciekawy. Hackman świetnie zagrał, natomiast tam jest taka scena, którą zawsze będę pamiętał, jak generał Sosabowski, wyskakując z samolotu już nad Arnem, powiedział: "Boże, chroń Montgomery'ego", a w oryginale słowa pana generała były zupełnie inne, bo generał Sosabowski powiedział wtedy: nie chcę mówić brzydko, Montgomery'ego. Bo tak właśnie było.
General Sosabowski was concerned about some of the military planning that went in and the strategy that they had. I mean, I think Market Garden could have been successful, and at the time when the Polish brigade had been inserted into the pocket of Arnhem that was still being held by the British 1st Airborne Division, they were never going to retake Arnhem, but Sosabowski, with the commander of the 43rd Wessex Division, had identified a crossing downstream, which they could have, if the 30 Corps had followed, taken that route to actually make the entire operation a success. But instead, Browning he commanded Sosabowski to attend an interview and wouldn't even let him sit down, and blamed the failure of Market Garden on General Sosabowski. And when he was he was basically sent away from his unit. His command was taken from him, and he had done nothing wrong. So that would be my next mission. I work with Dr. Mark Sawicki, who did the Debt of Honor film, and I helped him launch the memorial to Polish forces, which includes the first independent Polish parachute brigade at the National Arboretum for veterans. So I think we need to take that further, and we will. I wouldn't personally focus on a Victoria Cross, because the conditions for giving a Victoria Cross are very, very specific, and today are only given for people who died in military action, I believe. So that would be a bridge too far. I think it's important to make have ambitions that are achievable. I think some form of official recognition that he had received the wrong treatment, and an apology for that would be achievable, but I wouldn't focus on trying to secure a Victoria Cross in my opinion. But the Battle of Arnhem was due to, if it had been successful, would have shortened the war and got the Western Allies into Germany before the Russians, and could perhaps have helped an independent Poland rather than being occupied by, I mean, this is a speculative history, but the failure of it meant the war continued longer. And I think that for the Polish troops at Arnhem, they had an ambition to be parachuted into Warsaw to help the uprising. I know militarily that was not feasible. They would have all been shot down, and a lot of bombers and gliders would have perished, and Stalin wasn't allowing Allied air forces to refuel in Russian-held land. I mean, so that wasn't possible. But you can imagine the emotions of those Polish parachutists. At the same time, this was, I think, towards the end of the uprising, but also the Battle of Falaise Gap was at the start of the uprising. So the feelings and sentiment of those Polish soldiers when they knew that their compatriots were fighting a cause that the Russians had argued and persuaded and leafleted and put megaphones out saying, now's the time to rise up. And then all across the front, they put down their arms to allow the Germans to capture and destroy Warsaw. So I think the Poles have survived is quite extraordinary.
Michael, jesteś biznesmenem, bardzo mocno działasz. Dodatkowo jesteś dziennikarzem, dbasz o naszą polską historię. Sam sfinansowałeś napisanie scenariusza. No ale właśnie, moje przedostatnie pytanie dotyczy tego, czy może powstanie film o wojennych działaniach twojego taty.
That's interesting you said that. You're not the first person to say that, and when I stop my current job, I would like to pursue that interest. I think I've seen a lot of Polish films about the war, and that affect Polish history, I think sometimes they have a lens on them which is too sentimental to make them good films. So I think you need to have a rigorous editorial perspective, which interestingly I commissioned a screenplay about one of the women fighters, the Home Army, and we've been talking with Polish directors, but I've been trying to see if we can get somebody in Hollywood interested, because I think it's, again, an extraordinary story that needs to be told to a wider audience, and I think you need a bit more, shall we say, Hollywood magic dust to make that happen. But the other thing I'd say about business is that I've been doing my job. I've been a chief executive for 30 years in different companies, now my own company. And what concerns me is that in business now, there are people who behave in the same way that Russia does, that they are stronger and they bully you.
It's true.
And they know that you're too small to be able to afford to take action through the law. And I know who those people are. They know who they are. And if they think they're going to take somebody on of Polish extraction and make them surrender, they've got the wrong thing coming.
W Polsce powstaje bardzo wiele filmów na temat II wojny światowej, ale tak naprawdę filmy, one są zrobione dla nas, dla nas Polaków mówię, ale te filmy tak naprawdę nie są zrozumiałe dla Brytyjczyków, Francuzów, Niemców, Amerykanów na świecie.
The one film that I thought was fantastic was Antony Wada,
Katyń, Andrzeja
Yes.
Wajdy.
Yes, so
Tak.
I met him when I first went to Poland in 1973. Our family and his family were staying at
In Warsaw or Krakow?
No, we were staying in Zakopane.
Okay.
And he was filming in Krakow. And we were going back to Krakow. We said, "Oh, come and watch the filming." And I'll tell you this story because it at the age of 10 or 11, it had a major impact on my where I saw things. So we were sitting there. We had like directors' chairs next to the director, and the action was happening. And this elderly gentleman with silver hair, who was an extra, walk on part to be part of a crowd scene, heard Wajda talk to my mother, Mrs. Moszinska, and he came very humbly and said, "I heard your name. Are you related to Stefan Moszyński?" It's a famous quote now. "Are you related to Stefan Moszyński?" And she said, "Yes, he was my late husband." And he introduced himself. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name, but he was a colonel in my father's unit. And so we were introduced to him and said, "No, and as a young boy, I'm thinking, he was a colonel in he should be on a good pension. Instead, he was earning, $2 a day as a walk-on part in a film. And I thought, what kind of system where, under communism, a colonel who fought, in a very big responsibility in the army is forced to do this. And so, these things affected me.
Okej, Michael, ostatnie moje pytanie związane jest z tym, co się dzieje za wschodnią granicą Polski. Wiadomo, imperialna polityka Rosji przypominająca sowiecką, homo sovieticus, barbarzyńska inwazja na Ukrainę. Z drugiej strony wojna hybrydowa skierowana przeciwko Polsce, jak i w ogóle całej państwom Unii Europejskiej, ale także państwom NATO. Jak ty oceniasz Putina? Jak ty oceniasz tą właśnie rosyjską politykę?
Well, my personal view on Putin is that he has an ambition to recreate the Soviet Union and possibly the Warsaw Pact in terms of the sort of imperial Russian empire that he was, as a senior secret service individual, saw falling apart before his eyes. So that, I think, is his drive and ambition. I think what's interesting from a military point of view is however strong Russia feels it is, and we all thought in NATO in the 1980s that Russia would sweep through the plains of Northern Europe, is that Ukrainian army at the time of the invasion was not well prepared. And yet after 3 years, Russia's only taken 20% of the country. now it's going to be difficult for Ukraine to keep fighting because they're a smaller country and
Yeah.
Russia's bigger. But my view would be that if countries like Poland, which is committing 4.7% of its GDP to defence, is strong, just on a conventional warfare point of view, if Russia after 3 years couldn't take Ukraine, it can't take Poland alone, let alone with the support of the Scandinavia, the Baltics, the Czechs, the British. Don't know about the Germans, but or the French, but you know, I think there is enough. So as long as the core countries remain committed to defence, I think we'll be okay. But we completely understand that for people on the front line, there's a lot of threat and concern, and the people coming across the border every day is an issue.
Bardzo serdecznie dziękuję. Michael Moszyński. Michael, bardzo dziękuję, że poświęciłeś nam swój czas, że mogliśmy się spotkać i już wiem, że to nie było nasze ostatnie spotkanie. Kochani, Michael Moszyński, człowiek, orkiestra, człowiek, który ma nie tylko polskie serce, ale również polską duszę i polską krew. Takich ludzi warto poznać.
My pleasure, and very delighted to have met you. Thank you for you and your team to come here to meet with me, and this for me is a very special place, and actually sitting here reminds me of the most precious thing of all, which is peace. In order to have peace, we have to be prepared, we have to be strong, and we have to, as Winston Churchill said, never give up, never give up, never give up.
To wszystko na moim kanale, na moich mediach społecznościowych i oczywiście na YouTubie, na kanale DB from London. Darek Bohatkiewicz z Londynu.